Welcome to ESVN, the Emma Sports Vigeland Network show. My name is Emma Vigeland, and you know what to do, folks. Subscribe, youtube.com/ESVN show. Put on push notifications, like the stream if you're watching us live. Comment below if you're not. Rate us 5 stars on Apple, on Spotify, wherever you're listening to this show. And say hello to Bradley Alsop.
Hello, everyone.
Hello. And meant to ask you, you have a Vampire Weekend shirt on, first of all.
I do.
I do see your Instagram activity, so
oh my
I
God,
believe
no way.
you were at the...
You're stalking me?
You're aware that I follow you on Instagram, right? Sometimes we interact over DM.
This is the first time I'm hearing
about this. How was Vampire Weekend? Vampire Weekend is from Montclair, New Jersey, which is my hometown. I mean, I moved to Glenridge, the town, over late, like in 2nd grade.
So, funnily enough, so Ezra Koenig, the lead singer of Vampire Weekend, is from our area,
Montclair, New Jersey,
and actually, funnily enough, I believe he's from Glen Ridge originally. Ezra Koenig.
It's like I don't even bother saying Glen Ridge because it's such a small town.
But yeah, because the reason I know this too, just is because I've seen Vampire Weekend a number of times. Because fun fact, I'm very distantly related to Rostam, who was one of the founding members of the band. He's no longer in the band. He produces sometimes for them, but he now he's a solo artist. Very distantly, like literally my grandmother's cousin's son. But because of that, because in Iranian families, there's always a 5th to 7th order connection of somebody you might know that can help you do fun things.
Right.
His mother, when we were younger, me and my friends, we were able to go backstage a few times earlier on in their career when they played like at the United Palace Theater in Harlem or at Radio City. So I met the guys a few times, and Ezra told me about him growing up in Glen Ridge and stuff like that.
I mean, there's nothing that will take me back to like a high school frame of mind than listening to early Vampire Weekend.
Yeah, so it's truly classic. Like, but I think both for like kind of one of my first independent musical enjoyments being their first album, and then also just the fact that so many of those songs kind of went into the rom-com or like kind of Judd Apatow comedy soundtrack pipeline around that time as well, I feel like.
Totally. I mean, I also I associate learning about that kind of music with really just smoking weed.
Of course, yeah,
time.
Totally fair, yeah.
Which I did with my Montclair friends. My all-girls school friends were a little bit more buttoned up than I was.
We need to take a load off.
Believe it or not, I was a bit of a problem kid in the all-girls school setting. They were a bit scandalized by my love of weed. But, it's paid dividends for me now because it's just increased my anxiety. And,
and
it's only my memory loss.
So... 2 for 2.
2 for 2.
bonus. What were we talking about?
Sports.
Anyway.
We'll talk about. Let's just get this out of the way before we get into football. The baseball. I'm back to being a fan because the Mets are actually good and they won the wild card series against the Brewers in Game 3 and then went straight to Philly and ended up winning Game 1. And they're a fun team. It's an interesting team. It's very different from previous years, like the last time that the Mets had won a playoff series was in their World Series run, if I'm not mistaken. And that's
back in 2015.
I remember that vividly, and how pitching carried the day for the Mets in that regard. Now it's more offense, and particularly late inning offense, that's getting them on the board and carrying them over. Just some great hitting. Pete Alonso is their power hitter, and he had the game of his life in Game 3 in Milwaukee. But there've been a lot of great contributors, and Francisco Lindor is proving this season to be worth every penny.
And Alonso. It was a kind of a roller coaster of a game for Pete Alonso, but also, this was also coming in the midst of the Mets being, seen as somewhat of a disappointment earlier in the season because they started off so in such a cold place and really surged to make it to even have a chance to get into the wild card round. Right. And right before Pete Alonso hit the home run to take the lead against the Brewers, he had that very, what would have been seen as a pretty backbreaking error by not being able to corral that foul ball in foul territory. So a catch that seemed kind of somewhat routine, and he just kind of bobbled it. So it was really nice to see him be able to redeem himself, but also because there had been a lot of scuttlebutt about how this may have been, if they had lost this game. And, who's to say, obviously, after whatever happens with this series or the next, if there is one, have been some conversations about whether, Pete Alonso will move on to another team after this year.
He's a free agent.
So him coming through in that moment and kind of, avenging that error, and also extending the life of this Mets team that was already had a bit of an improbable run to the postseason was really exciting. And honestly, yesterday's game 2 was just obviously an absolute nail biter until the very end, until Nick Castellanos hit that single in the bottom of the ninth to take it 7-6 for the Phillies. But I'm
very had a two-run ninth at the top of the ninth to tie it up, and then before that, Zach Wheeler in the game prior had been basically pitching lights out until the relievers came in, and then the Mets were able to capitalize and win that game. Yeah. So it's on a razor's edge every time, unlike what we saw last night with the Padres just homering and homering.
It being a bit of a mash fest, yeah.
Everyone who's not a Dodgers fan is rooting for the Padres. Sorry to tell the Dodgers.
And the thing is, even I was even sort of, the last time the Mets even sort of sniffed playoff action was the other wild card round they were in either 2 or 3 years ago against the Padres. And that famous, I don't know if you'll recall that there was a concern about starting pitcher Joe Musgrove of having that substance on his ear.
I remember
when they
that,
were
yes.
thoroughly checking his ear. I've always wanted the Padres to kind of go a little bit farther, because it's been a long time since they've either made the World Series or even been in the NLCS. So they've been playing really, really well this season. So it would be nice. On one hand, I think it would be nice to sort of topple the Dodgers' supremacy in their division and in the National League, but also a part of me does love seeing Shohei Ohtani in the postseason.
In his first playoff series. Yeah, I mean, like Tatis was mocking the fans and sticking out his tongue.
And there are a lot of big personalities on that Padres team, with also Manny Machado there, who are two guys who are no strangers to trying to mix it up a little bit, which I love, because I love sort of kind of upending the little bit of the stuffiness of Major League Baseball with some swagger and some braggadocio.
Totally. I mean, right now, I guess the Guardians piled it on with the Tigers. They're at the top of the first as we speak. And then tonight you have the Yankees and the Royals again. The Yankees, that was a close game, and the Royals were able to get some offense specifically early, but I think it was in the 7th that the Yankees had the run that took them ahead, and then they ended up winning by 1 run in the last game. So 6-5 in game 1. They play game 2 tonight. The Mets go back to New York. They play at home tomorrow. And yeah, I to be honest, the only of the 3 series that I haven't caught it all has been Guardians Tigers, but it's because I saw the score for game 1, and it was I was like, all right, I'll tune into something else.
And that's tough. I mean, I'm happy for the Tigers, because they had a similar story of being, they were almost a little bit dead in the water in the wild card race until they had a really resurgent kind of like last 6 to 8 weeks of the season to get into the playoffs. And unfortunately, for a Orioles team that has really, really come back from kind of the height of mediocrity, in the late 2010s to early 2020s, to being kind of a regular season powerhouse, but then still kind of maintaining their winless streak in the playoffs against a hot Tigers team was kind of a bummer, because I really enjoy watching the Orioles. But Tigers, these are 2 teams that I think are kind of, it's just not obviously as high notable, given that the Yankees are playing in the other series, just in terms of like markets or in terms of what people are heavily focusing on. But Cleveland and Detroit are 2 really, really good teams, and I think they could whoever comes
Cleveland's been phenomenal all year.
Oh yeah, and whoever comes out of this series, I think can make some noise against the Yankees or Kansas City. It's also definitely not lost on me that the Royals and the Mets are in the playoffs again after they beat them in the World Series 9 years ago.
Oh my gosh! All right, well, don't go too far down that. Don't go too far down that rabbit hole. I mean, I think I think that the Mets and maybe the Phillies, based on my viewing so far of these series, might have a hard time with both the Padres and the Dodgers. I don't know how you feel about that, basically in terms of advancing.
Oh no, those are two. Even the Phillies are really really good. This is obviously the team that was in the World Series. 2 years ago, and actually, was it the last 2 years? Was it back to back? No, sorry, 2 years ago, because the Diamondbacks were in the World Series last year, so it was 2 years ago.
Right.
But they really have most of the same team, and honestly, they've been playing like incredible, really, really good ball. So, I would love it if obviously the Mets could advance, but I even think just being competitive against a really good Phillies team is more than I could really bargain for. And just to amend, Derek in the YouTube chat reminded me the Padres were actually in the NLCS against the Phillies in that playoffs.
Yes, that was a bit of a Cinderella run for them, and then they started spending and
right. And I more mean the World Series because I think it has been sometimes, and San Diego's been there, but. Overall, super exciting to kind of reinvigorate the kind of sad and hard feelings I was having with the Mets earlier in the year. So, anything after this, the fact that they won the wild card series, which, by the way, fun fact, since the new wild card series rules were imposed for these 3-game series that lead into the NLDS, only 2 of them had gone to 3 games, meaning the tiebreaker game, and both featured the Mets.
And this is the first Mets playoff series against the Phillies ever.
That's really wild to me.
Shocking.
That's crazy.
Given their rivalry that exists outside of the playoffs, it's just like the kind of thing where, I mean, that it should have the spice that the Padres and Dodgers do for that reason. We'll see how Game 3 goes. Now, back to the NFL, our sweet spot. Let's just go through the week. We can start with the best Thursday night football game that we've had so far. Although I guess you could count the opening game between the Ravens and the Chiefs, which was really good. Although technically, for copyright purposes, that is a Sunday night football production because NBC put it out and TNF is owned by Amazon Prime at this point in terms of their rights. But, so for true Thursday night football, this was probably the best game so far. The Falcons beat the Buccaneers in overtime. It was 30-30 going into OT. And then Kadarrell Hodge, who came in towards the end of the game, I think, got a pass over the middle from Kirk Cousins and ran into the end zone. And then the Falcons ended up winning by 6. Kyle Pitts still inconsistent, but seemed to develop a better role so far under Zach Robinson. They're easing him in and using him a little bit more efficiently. I thought the Bucs looked really good, and I thought they were going to win for a while. It looked like they were going to. But then when the Buccaneers, I guess, were driving, it was 30-27. Bucky Irving, who has looked great, had a fumble. And that's what ended up in tying the game. And then they went to overtime. The Falcons won the toss. They drive down the field. Didn't even give Baker Mayfield, who is playing phenomenally, an opportunity to touch the football. Kirk Cousins, despite, for me, still the eye test showing that he's not necessarily all there, he still is smart and can run an offense like this. And Zach Robinson is setting him up. He threw for over 500 yards.
Yeah,
touchdowns
I
and
couldn't
interception.
believe it. It was a crazy stat line after the first few weeks for the Falcons offense.
The Falcons are almost like the reverse of what they were last year, where they were good enough to be in a lot of games, but somehow, some way, Desmond Ridder or Taylor Heineke would put them in a position where they lost in the final seconds. Kirk Cousins has reversed the trend that he was known for so much of his career, unable to perform in prime time. They've now had 2 primetime games, Thursday Night Football against their division rival, the Bucs, at home, but then also against Philadelphia, where I think that had more to do with the Eagles' defense being called horribly. But they ended up winning in the clutch, which people said Kirk Cousins was unable to do. So, some of those narratives are so silly in primetime, whatever, Kirk Cousins crumbles. It's more about the team than it is about anything. But he seems to have at least settled in. And even if he's not physically exactly where he always was, he's an older player, has that mental toughness that we can't disparage.
I think there are times, and obviously we'll see if this carries over into the coming weeks. But I do think sometimes, especially in the early goings in the NFL season that sometimes it just there is a bit of an acclimation period to kind of the live rounds of regular season football where offensive schemes, but I mean both offensive and defensive schemes kind of come together a little bit more, and the pieces start to make a little bit more sense and like look as we maybe think that they should on paper. And that was sort of the game I felt it was, at least for Atlanta this week, where I was like, oh, okay, like everyone is sort of in the role that I think that they should be in and are kind of operating at the highest level. Like, you know, Drake London had a lot of great catches. He was kind of looking like sort of the X receiver that they've wanted him to be. And, you know, he has been great. I just mean like down in and down out, he was just like, you know, bringing down balls and
his possession and basket. They always point out his basketball.
Yeah, as in, like he was really
it's true.
Totally, he was really.
Also, I'm sorry, I was laughing because this is a green smoothie, but look at how it goes into the background. Anyway, keep going.
Oh wait, let me see.
Honestly, it works perfectly. It's the exact same color.
Drinking sludge.
Yeah, here I am drinking tar.
Yeah,
go on.
And so I loved seeing that because it was sort of. He was kind of working exactly the way that, like, you know, the high ceiling of a guy like Drake London could work in a kind of spread-ish offense like this one. And Pitt's kind of doing what I thought, you know, we had talked about it earlier in the season he was best at, which is like instead of making him the guy who goes far and wide out, to bring down deep balls, using his athleticism in like the over the middle kind of like slot positioning or flat positioning on the field, and which worked to great effect, especially when he had the ball in his hands and was able to kind of get something going on the ground after he caught it. And then the switch up between the change of pace between Bijan Robinson and Tyler Algier really working.
Although they couldn't run the ball in this game, that's the thing is that's why Cousins threw over for over 500 yards. Vita Vea was all over it.
But interestingly, I almost felt like the run plays with Algier were working more effectively than the ones with Bijan this game. Interestingly, I just think maybe they had more scouted for what they were expecting Bijan to do as opposed to Algier. But. So I think it's a great credit to Zach Robinson and this team for having a week where really everything came together in a way that it hadn't in the past, like, you know, four-ish weeks. But I also think it helped for both teams that they were very able with how the scheme was performing, but also with the rosters they were facing on the other end of the ball to really carve up their respective defenses. Whereas I think Zach Robinson in this Falcons office kind of stepped into something this game. I think this was even further solidified that like Liam Cohen is a legit offensive coordinator for this Bucs team, and this offense looks much more multifaceted and much more kind of like a well-oiled machine, even in the run game outside of the Bucky Irving fumble, than it did last year. And that this Bucs offense might not just be like, oh, we beat up on terrible defenses every year. They actually might be a force going forward. It's not to say anything that the Falcons defense is incredible, just the fact that they were able to really kind of run and move the ball at will against this Falcons defense.
The NFC South is going to be really, really competitive, and we'll see how the Saints fare tonight. They could make that really interesting. But now that's 2 divisional games for the Falcons where they won that they could have easily lost, but they pulled it out, and that can make all the difference when it comes to playoff time.
That's always the amazing thing, especially in football. I think it matters in the sense of it being such a small sample size, but truly, like a divisional game that in week 5 can sometimes pay dividends, you know, in late December.
And then I guess we'll turn to your Jets because we're going in chronological order.
Oh, my God.
9:30 a.m. Eastern start in London. The Vikings defeated the Jets. They are still undefeated, looking phenomenal. And like what we're seeing with Cousins in Atlanta, the Vikings have been able to be clutch at the end of games. This is a theme for them, that they've run up a lead, then the team gets back into it like the Jets did. They make it a 1-score game, and like the game before with the Packers. But at the end of the day, the Vikings are still able to make clutch plays and not lose their lead, even though they're kind of stepping off the gas a little bit to let these teams back into it. They know when to slam the door, and that's what happened against the Jets. The Jets started to come back in the third quarter. Greg Zuerlein had a field goal, and it was 17-10. But then the Vikings were able to just close the door and win the game in the end. earlier in the game, there were opportunities for the Jets. The Vikings went up 3-0, and then Ty Chandler basically bobbled a pitch to him, and the Jets were able to recover that. But then Rodgers couldn't capitalize, and he turned the ball right back over by throwing it to Andrew Van Ginkel, who picked off Rodgers. He ran for over 60 yards, had a touchdown on the defensive side for the Vikings. And then there was another interception of Rodgers by Bynum, and a third one, and I can't remember who had that. But Harrison Smith also had a sack of Aaron Rodgers in the game. I saw on Twitter, this is an amazing stat. He's one of just 7 players in the history of the NFL. He has at least 30 career interceptions and at least 20 career quarterback sacks. And he's in the same room in that regard as Brian Dawkins, as Rodney Harrison, Charles Woodson, Rondé Barber. So just giving some love for Harrison Smith over there on the Vikings with a long storied career on that front and how he can be a ball hawk. But we can just talk now about the Jets and Aaron Rodgers. The Vikings go into their bye undefeated. That's phenomenal. The Jets, the talent is all there, but everything you've been saying is still showing up. The lack of discipline, the lack of attention to detail. Aaron Rodgers' body language is horrible for a guy that is supposedly so happy. The
vibes at least this week, they definitely appear to be souring.
They don't do any motion at the line of scrimmage.
There is nothing going on, even the most rudimentary element of which they are disguising what they are about to do at all. Chris Sims pointed this out in a recap.
My guy.
In a recap, because I think I was watching is he NFL Network?
He's Sunday Night Football.
Oh yeah,
so
I was
NBC.
watching the pregame on Sunday night. He showed what was happening pre-snap to and what Andrew Van Ginkel, who caught the interception that led to the pick six.
Yeah.
He showed what Van Ginkel was picking up on, which was basically Rodgers gets set under center, makes points of motion to slant routes. Van Ginkel immediately says, "Oh, he's throwing a slant route." Rodgers snaps the ball. Van Ginkel backpedals, goes right into the pocket that Rodgers is throwing to, picks it off, and takes it in for a touchdown. Because it's literally foretold.
Yeah.
He's literally saying, I'm doing the slants concept from this read. I'm throwing to this guy. If you want to park yourself there, welcome.
It's just crazy because you see how Saleh has handed over the entire offense to him.
The entire
Nathaniel
team,
Hackett.
basically, outside of the defense.
And there's no creativity on offense because part of what the issue was with Mike McCarthy was that Rodgers was running a really rudimentary offense. Then with Nathaniel Hackett as his OC, it was still pretty rudimentary at the end of the day. And it's like he's almost regressed to a point where he feels comfortable, but it's like, this team is not about you feeling comfortable. We understand you feel comfortable in the offense. He apparently feels comfortable in putting so much pressure on his receivers to run the exact precise route without any pre-snap motion to disguise what they're doing. You have to run this exact step, Garrett Wilson, get to this hash, and then be this precise on your slant, and then I will meet you in timing. And then when he doesn't connect, you see him like,
But it's never always the appearance is that sort of like it's always, at least from my perspective as a viewer, it always seems as when something like that happens, when there's a bit of a communication delay, if there's a batted down pass, if there's some sort or if it's covered too well and he has to throw the ball away, something like that, he always reacts as if like someone has like disappointed him.
I know, and it's just crazy because this is not a way to win. This is not a way to win. Just on timing and the precision. He still throws a beautiful ball, like truly, it's gorgeous. But you need more than that, and it's this arrogance to me that just permeates his career at this point, where you can't just put that all on the receiver. You've got to get more creative. Defenses are extremely advanced. We are seeing it all throughout this season. Their ability to limit even the most high-powered offenses in the NFL, like the 49ers. We'll get to that in a little bit.
Yep.
But the better defenses have an edge right now on some of these offenses, and Rodgers is doing them no favors.
And if you're trotting out a playbook that wouldn't be out of place in like the locker room of Steve Young's 49ers in the mid 1990s, then like these defenses, who as you've been saying, Emma, are completely keyed in on taking away explosive plays and sort of making you kind of earn every yard. Teams are working way harder in terms of how they're diversifying their playbook to obtain those yards than I think Aaron Rodgers and Nathaniel Hackett are. And I put Rodgers first because he controls the scheme of this offense.
He does.
Every output from the Jets offense is authorized and approved by Aaron Rodgers.
Yep.
Nathaniel Hackett is a figurehead for Aaron Rodgers.
Yeah.
And Robert Saleh, to his discredit, has made it so that he also operates as a figurehead for Aaron Rodgers. And it is no way to inspire confidence in a team when everyone around the organization, everyone watching this team, sort of knows that everything has been ceded towards Aaron Rodgers.
And there's no creativity in the run game either without the pre-snap
notion.
No,
it's Breece Hall running into a thicket of linemen.
And the only reason Braylon Allen is having more success right now just because he's a bigger body and because he can get through that line, the defensive line better. But it's not like there's creativity in Braylon Allen's runs either.
And he's a 20-year-old rookie. Like, it's a lot to, and also especially after how highly we were touting Breece Hall coming into the season with good reason, but it's also like he's sort of being failed by the not
exactly.
only some of the offensive line play in front of him, but also just how when we sort of talk about like run fits or whatever, kind of like that, the concept of like not just like, oh, there's an opening, but sort of like how offensive linemen angle themselves, where they position themselves, if there's pin pull stuff of kind of like pulling a guy from the opposite side of the formation to take on a block coming from the other end. None of that is employed.
Yeah.
It's hand off the ball, see if Breece Hall can make it through 8 different guys. And if he falls on his face or hits another lineman and goes down for 2 yards, all right, let's give it another shot.
It just feels like Rodgers is trying to run this offense as if he like can see everything because of his whole ayahuasca.
Right, like he's omniscient.
And he's omniscient. That's not enough, dude. He really overestimates his own intelligence, and that's unfortunate for me to say as somebody would say he's one of my favorite players ever.
And as I was saying, and I've been saying literally since last season, this team still, despite this veneer of so-called like toughness and like tenacity, constantly make mistakes, constantly find themselves at a disadvantage in terms of leverage on either end of the ball, constantly get the most
ridiculous penalties,
incur the most back-breaking, inexplicable penalties at crucial moments in the game. That has not changed since Robert Saleh has been the coach of this team, and Aaron Rodgers returning behind center was not the thing that's going to change it.
Yeah, he looks like he doesn't even want to be there, to be honest with you.
Because I think all he would want to be there for is for everything to go exactly the way he wants to in order for him to feel validated in his approach.
And it would be one thing if he were like Brady when he went to Tampa, where he doesn't just have like a massive amount of accumulation of football knowledge. He has a massive amount of accumulation of the best football knowledge from one of the greatest football minds in all time. Rodgers never had a coach, never, that was that intelligent in Green Bay. And also, he never understood the culture of winning in the way that New England engendered with Brady. So he could go down to Tampa in a pandemic year and be like, this is, he could play the role that Rodgers thinks he's playing, but with actual great effect. And that's unfortunate.
And the only coach I would say would even be close to that, just in terms of kind of like an actually like dynamic offensive coach, is Matt LaFleur, but he was completely checked out by that point.
Well, he wasn't listening to LaFleur, and that was a big part of the issue.
He didn't want to be there under LaFleur, and he also didn't want to kind of like co-opt his style. He wanted it to still be what he was comfortable with, despite LaFleur clearly wanting to move the offense in a different direction.
And we see how much better it looks.
Right, and the difference is now, obviously, is that LaFleur is the one with the creative offensive playbook, and we're stuck with, hey, Aaron, let me copy off your paper from the guy he fucking watches Austin Powers with.
Yeah.
Like,
Oh my god, it's like literally just grow up, frat boys, please. I love Austin Powers. It's still of all these comedies, like it's aged better than the freaking Hangover because it's goofy
it's truly no disparagement. Yeah, truly
booga, women, they treat it like a joke as opposed to the Hangover. Right.
Truly no disparagement of the movies. It's more I just think it's funny that you know, Hackett's making fucking PowerPoints themed in Austin Powers. Aaron Rodgers like, oh, that's so funny.
Fart jokes, yeah, man.
Did you put a whoopee cushion on my? Did you take the screw looses on my chair?
Yeah.
Oh, you're such an idiot, bro.
Right. That is not the way that New England would have operated. Just to continue with that Brady comparison. Okay, so the Ravens won and beat the Bengals in overtime. This was a frustrating game for me because I found myself rooting for the Bengals, even though I'm a huge Lamar and Jackson and Ravens fan. I just didn't want them to be 1-4. You know, it's just such a hard hole.
It's so tough. Yeah.
I wanted them to at least be in the playoff conversation, and they still may be. Like, I looked up their next opponents. They play the Giants on Sunday Night Football next week.
Nice.
Kill me. But then they play, and they'll probably win that game. But, I mean, this defense is horrible, so who knows? And Malik Neighbors may be back next week. But then they play the Browns. They'll probably win that game.
And Dax Hill, their safety that they drafted, he apparently just suffered a season-ending injury.
And he'd been playing corner because they've been struggling, so they shifted him over, and he tore his ACL. So they play the Giants, the Browns, the Eagles, the Raiders, the Ravens, and then the Chargers, and then bye. So they can afford probably to lose 2 of those games to get back to 6-6 before their bye. And then it's still an uphill climb for them. But we'll go to the Ravens being phenomenal, and then we'll talk about the Bengals. Lamar Jackson threw for 4 touchdowns. He had this phenomenal play where he stiff-armed Hubbard.
It's so crazy.
Hubbard, who's not having a good year. The only defensive player that seems to show up on that side of the ball is Trey Hendrickson, and even that is not necessarily that effective. But again, get to the Bengals in a second. The Ravens look like they are back to elite form, 3 straight wins, and they are now able to win in multiple ways. This is the exciting thing about them. For me, the Texans, the Vikings. This is the sign of a complete team. Like the Vikings can have, like they did against the Jets, the defense just took over, 3 interceptions, a defensive touchdown. That won the game for them. The Ravens have shown that they can be a great defensive team, although I think they've lost some guys, but Roquan Smith, Kyle Hamilton, studs. They can now, when they have established the run, pass the ball. Zay Flowers got going. Even the tight ends, Isaiah Likely finally got back in the end zone, and Mark Andrews still doesn't look right, but
Rashad Bateman had a big catch.
Totally. This was just like a highlight reel game, and the Bengals. It's a testament to them and Joe Burrow, who's now back to playing at an elite level, that they were able to even put up that many points on this defense. Joe Burrow is the 3rd quarterback in the history of the NFL to have a losing record through 5 games, despite throwing 12 touchdowns and completing 70% of his passes, says ESPN research. 5 touchdowns, 1 interception in this game, which happened at the end. The thing is that the Bengals defense is like absolutely historically bad. Do you have that stat that you found before the game, Bradley?
Yeah. Do you want me to put it up, or I can
just read it?
Okay. So Austin Gale, who's formerly of PFF but now works over with the Ringer and on at Spotify, tweeted this out yesterday. The Bengals offense is averaging 0.94 EPA per drive and 2.94 actual points per drive. Both numbers are the best for the franchise in weeks 1 through 5 since at least 2000. The Bengals defense is allowing 2.73 points per drive, the worst number for the franchise in weeks 1 through 5 since at least 2000. So this 1-4 team primarily is 1-4 because despite having at least by the team standards for the last almost 25 years, their best offensive output, their defense at the same time is providing their worst defensive output since the turn of the century.
It's good for fantasy. If you guys have Jamar Chase or Joe Burrow, that means they're going to have to keep throwing a ton. But damn, it's a shame because they've been holding things together with duct tape at the start of the year, and they've always found a way to get it together. But in terms of personnel, they can't stop the run. They can't get after the passer. They're losing key guys in the secondary who aren't making plays. And I don't know how this defense gets corrected. Joe Burrow said it after the game. We're not a playoff team right now, and that's exactly how they're playing.
And it's so tough because I think it's a relative rarity and a real testament, obviously, to how fantastic this Bengals offense has been looking, to get a jump on a genuinely, in my view, good defense with good personnel like the Ravens, hang 38 points on them and still lose.
Yeah.
Because your defense is so porous.
Yep.
To have like an extremely effective, efficient offensive output like that, to be able to kind of get and I thought that, and similarly, Burrow was kind of bouncing it all over the field a little bit as well. T. Higgins had 2 touchdowns. That Jamar Chase with his great with the great touchdowns he had, the short yardage Chase Brown touchdown. They played really well, but it is not sustainable, especially against a team like the Ravens with their own firepower on the under end of the ball, to get into a shootout kind of knowing that you can't stop anyone on the other end.
It's not sustainable if they want to make a deep run in the playoffs or get there.
And with what Lamar was able to do, which is what Luan Rumo tried his best, knowing where their weaknesses were, basically sending as much pressure as humanly possible, sending as many bodies at the problem as possible, to kind of stifle or neutralize the run, which was so successful last week when Derrick Henry, ran for, had 200 all-purpose yards or whatever it was. While they were able to do that, it opened up the space for Lamar to carve up whatever he was getting over in the air.
Right.
Which he's obviously very much capable to do. The man just won the MVP award. He's not just a pair of legs. He's a great pocket passer. And he was like, okay, you're going to leave
total command of this offense at this point.
You're going to leave this open for me, that I'm just going to take what's there. I'm going to take what's on the menu.
Speaking of MVP candidates, the other MVP candidate, I would say right now, and who was leading up until this game, is Josh Allen. Josh Allen of the Buffalo Bills, who had his worst game of the season against the Houston Texans. He started 1 for 9 without Shakir. And then, and also I would say, C.J. Stroud started really hot and then cooled off in the second half. He had a 67-yard touchdown to Nico Collins, who left with a hamstring issue. He's considered day-to-day, and Stroud kind of cooled down after his big receiver left the game. The Texans are also struggling to run the ball. Like, Cam Akers has been just getting stuffed on early downs, and it's not leading to the most efficient offense that the Texans could have. I have hope that they're going to ramp up, and my Super Bowl pick is still kicking here. But let's just pull up this image of Josh Allen. This is getting a lot of attention. We'll play the video a little. This is a video of the TV screen, so I think we're safe to play this. But if not, whatever. This is how Josh Allen hit the ground playing against the Texans, and it's causing some outrage. I saw on Twitter, I haven't seen the footage, but apparently CNN's even covering this. So this is about to turn into a big story. Josh Allen probably got a concussion and then was let back in the game. Here we go. So for people listening on the podcast, you can see how hard, Jesus, his head hits the ground, and his teammates all circled around him. Now, just play it one more time so you get the sense. Okay, and you see his left arm goes limp there. Jesus Christ. Okay. So, as a side note, by the way, these black Texans jerseys were very ugly. Atrocious. And I really like their regular ones. So then this was some footage and an image that people saw of him being handed. No, that's not one of those candy cigarettes. That's smelling salts or a piece of saltwater taffy. The Bills were offering him smelling salts, and he got back in the game really soon after that, as after going to the medical tent to check out what was a shoulder or an ankle or something like that. This is an issue with the concussion protocol, okay? Josh Allen should not have come back into that game. And I don't really care what the circumstances were. Especially after, in a game against the Buffalo Bills, Tua Tagovailoa once again had another horrific head injury that has sidelined him for quite a while. He went back into the game within a few minutes. I don't know the full story yet. People are writing this up, but like none of the commentators on the broadcast seemingly wanted to bring it up. But he was out for just a few minutes, and I'm pretty sure the time that he was off the field and Trubisky went in was shorter than the amount of time that a traditional concussion evaluation takes. And the Bills have an issue here because this is also he hit his head hard last week as well. And Josh Allen, one of my favorite players in the game, this league needs to take this stuff seriously. And I don't care if he's one of the best players in the NFL and says, I want to get back out there. There should be the same rule for everybody. And there needs to be a third party, not the team just handling this, honestly. And not someone associated with the NFL.
And I think that's sort of what we were talking about in the context of the Tua situation of like it not necessarily being sort of enough for the NFL to have the kind of brokerage responsibility of whether these guys should or should not come back in, only because we know that players don't ever want to really be taken out. And we also know that I don't think it's too cynical to say that teams are also still going to think that maybe my jostled, addled, potentially, concussed player, if he can kind of perform at a reasonably high enough level, that he still offers a better competitive advantage than putting out our backup quarterback, which is completely seeing in
a close game against another AFC rival you could see in the playoffs that you can't rely on the coaching staff to make that decision, especially
because they're only going to make it in terms of what's in service of what will get them farther.
Especially if you're like, I can't think of a team that's more reliant on their quarterback in terms of the lack of overall talent on the roster, given what Josh Allen provides for them. So just something to monitor. But again, the NFL has major issues with its concussion protocol, and they clearly haven't fixed things. And it's going to be. And the fact is that they already had litigation on this front. But I think there needs to be some federal oversight on this, to be honest with you. The other quarterback issue news here is that I really think that the Browns need to start thinking about benching Deshaun Watson. For weeks, we've been ranting on this program about how horrible Watson's body language is, how bitter he looks on the field, how it looks like he's not having fun. Anytime he smiles, it's just to like mock another player who's undoubtedly trash talking him with, he's a target-rich environment. And he's just such a cynical man. Like, it's crazy to see somebody who used to have so much fun playing football, even though he's not a good person, obviously. And that, at the time, was very infectious, and I was a big fan of Deshaun Watson. But he is just there for a paycheck. I don't know what else to say. He's holding this team back, and it's also creating issues with their defense, where there's just too much pressure. And Schwartz is having them send rushers, and it's leading to big plays on the other side of the ball. They were successful for a while. Jaden Daniels had his lowest completion percentage of the entire season so far, and he only threw for 238 yards and 1 touchdown and 1 interception, which for him is like not a good day based on the pace that he was at, but he still is obviously the favorite for Rookie of the Year. He had 82 rushing yards on 11 attempts. That's the first player in NFL history to pass for more than 1,000 yards and rush for at least 250 in his first 5 career games. He's playing incredibly. Washington is now 4-1 for the first time since 2008, their best record in that regard. The idea that the Commanders could be winning the division sounds insane, but they are in the lead right now. Brian Robinson has been phenomenal for them. But yeah, the Browns' offensive ratings this year: yards per play, 32. Pass net per play, 32. Sacks per pass play, 32. First downs per game, 29. Third down efficiency, 32. So they're dead last in every category: yards per play, pass net per play, sacks per pass play, and third down efficiency. And then they're third from last in first downs per game. It makes no sense given the personnel that they have on that side of the ball. They should be an average offense at the worst, given what we see in other areas of the NFL. Jameis Winston would provide a spark for this team. Deshaun Watson is not it. But once again, ownership is the problem in this situation, and this guaranteed deal that they gave to a player who had been accused of sexual assault, credibly, at the time, by dozens of women. Thoughts?
Well, I mean, that's even just the subtext being the fact that, like, beyond how poorly he's playing, he's also, like, reputationally radioactive.
Yeah.
Which makes it all the more. I mean, I understand the sunk cost will be rather titanic. It's a like we can't fully discuss the situation here without just acknowledging that it's potentially and at the very least one of the worst acquisitions I think I can remember in the history of professional sports.
Oh yeah.
So, like, understandably so, the Browns are probably also thinking about this in the context of if and when, hopefully it's when they bench this guy. It is obviously going to be incredibly embarrassing to undertake and to accept that this is the reality that they live in. It's their own fault. I don't feel bad for them in that regard, but they obviously will have to take that reputational hit.
I feel bad for Kevin Stefanski. His authority is undercut every time that guy's on the field because it's so clear the coach would no coach, if they were left to their own devices, would have him as their starting quarterback right now.
And obviously the financial liability that comes with it because of how foolishly they arbitrated this deal, backloading it so significantly so as to avoid the kind of the headlines of paying him so much money to join their team after everything that he's gone through in terms of his everything he has been accused of and had to arbitrate legally. But at the same time, given all of that, I still think that must be ignored at the expense of understanding that this is an offense that, by virtue of who they're playing, is making it so that nothing can succeed on the field. He is not at this moment meeting the requisite criteria for being a starting quarterback in the NFL. The offense is not functional. The offense with guys like Amari Cooper, David Njoku, even their backfield with Jerome Ford. This is not a team that should look this bad every single snap, and they only and the variable here is Deshaun Watson.
Yep.
It's not Kevin Stefanski. We've seen Kevin Stefanski marshal very successful offenses with Jacoby Brissett behind center, with Joe Flacco behind center. We know he is capable of what he is capable of in running an offense. The person who is not capable right now is the quarterback, and anything that blows back on Stefanski will be a complete dereliction of duty from the Haslams to blame somebody who's very much not at fault for what's going on. And for them to not put into Jameis Winston at this point, it is a tacit acknowledgement that the white flag is being waved, that the towel is being thrown in.
Deshaun Watson is averaging minus 0.3 EPA. That's expected. I want to make sure I get expected points added, not average, added. I had to look that up really quickly. I forgot what the A was. Deshaun Watson is averaging minus 0.3 EPA per dropback, the lowest number for any Browns quarterback in weeks 1 through 5 since at least 2000. And the second worst performance was Deshaun Watson last season. Minus 0.2.
So he's competing against himself.
He's competing against himself in terms of worst Browns quarterback. If you want to get a sense of how bad things are as it relates to the contract, Deshaun Watson this year and the year before has the most cash earned by any NFL player at $137.3 million. Mm-hmm. Dak Prescott comes in right below him, $137.25. Dak Prescott has been raking the Cowboys over the coals in contract negotiations, much to my happiness. Then Josh Allen, then Lamar, then Patrick Mahomes. But Deshaun is ahead of Dak, Allen, Jackson, Mahomes in terms of cash earned over the past 2 years. So that's how bad that contract is. And for those other guys, Dak, Josh Allen, Lamar, Mahomes, all drafted by the teams that extended them. The Browns are paying the most for this dude. Worst starting quarterback in the NFL by almost every metric. After they gave up 3 first-round picks plus a bunch of other picks.
And how's
the Houston Texans, and when he had a massive off-the-field liability and was clearly not someone of character.
And how's the offensive situation going in? How's the quarterback situation going in Houston now?
Pretty good.
Yeah.
Pretty good. Pretty good. Pretty good. Yeah, we didn't even get to CJ Stroud, but I talked about it briefly. He's my guy. He's my guy. You guys know how I felt about him coming out of the draft, and he's proven me right.
And the incredible thing, I think we sort of touched on this last week as well, is like he truly in whatever ways that the Texans are struggling on offense, it has nothing to do with him.
Totally.
Like he's still going back there making absolutely extraordinary passes. Really tough to see. Unfortunately, Nico Collins obviously sustained a bit of an injury and have to leave the game.
He's day to day, so it's at least not a pretty significant hamstring tear, right?
Yes, exactly. So that's definitely better to hear that news for sure. But even still, when Stroud went out, he was still parceling the ball out, a few good balls to Tank Dell. Like Stroud is basically going to acquit himself reliably, almost without fail every game, regardless of what's going on around him.
Yeah, I mean, and they're Super Bowl contenders, and the Browns are 1-4. We'll just do some quick hits on some other games that were a little less interesting to me, although I was watching this Jags-Colts game pretty closely for fantasy purposes.
That was another wild one, too.
But Trevor Lawrence finally had a good game. Yay! I mean, he threw an interception into triple coverage, throwing near the end zone in the third quarter. But Doug Peterson could have lost his job after this game. So there was every pressure-packed scenario that you could imagine. And additionally, because the Jags defense is freaking horrible. Horrible. Like, they had one good play by Trayvon Walker, who forced a fumble, which I was happy to see. But everything else, like their secondary just sucks. And their coordinator's not helping them. What's this mustachioed guy's name that I see over there on the sideline?
Oh, the Jags defensive coordinator?
Yeah.
Oh, what's his name?
Ryan Nielsen.
Ryan Nielsen. He was the Falcons coordinator last year. I was thinking of their OC, which is Press Taylor,
yes.
Zach Taylor's brother.
Yes. Another situation where the offense could use some creativity. No, Ryan Nielsen has been just pretty atrocious as defensive coordinator for the Jacksonville Jaguars. Joe Flacco almost got the Colts back into this game, throwing bombs to Alec Pierce, who's one of the most underrated receivers in the NFL right now. And, at the end, though, Trevor Lawrence answered on his birthday. He completed big passes to Christian Kirk, big passes to Brian Thomas Jr., who's looking like a phenomenal receiver, and us being high on him going into the draft made a ton of sense. And Tank Bigsby may have taken ETN's job, who was out with a shoulder injury, and Bigsby just kind of looks better with the eye test. So that's all I really have to say on that front. The Colts are still a team I don't know what to make of them. They have issues on defense as well. But they're still rebuilding, and Flacco looks like one of the best backups in the NFL. The Bears beat the Panthers. Okay, go, yeah.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, Flacco just, still being the ageless wonder after all of this. For just putting on another uniform. His
arm talent was always amazing, and he still has that, just he can throw the most beautiful pass you've ever seen.
And that's, I think, honestly, even though obviously the Anthony Richardson to Joe Flacco, obviously, style comparison as a starter to backup is stark. Even at his advanced age, if he with the Colts offensive line performing relatively well, if he's upright, as you're saying, he can probably dispatch some of these duties much better than a number of younger backups.
Absolutely.
I almost think it gives them a higher floor, knowing that you'd be putting Flacco out playing like this as opposed to
Well, guys with his experience that have won Super Bowls that were, at one point Joe Flacco was the most highly paid player in the NFL. Usually have too big of an ego to take on this kind of role. But Flacco, what I love about him is that he has no ego. He doesn't care about being a backup. He just wants to play football for as long as he can. And that's just something that I just think is so cool.
Yeah, he does seem like a decent guy.
Yeah.
Which I also appreciate.
Yeah, and when back in the day, like I told you, the Ravens were my AFC mistress. I love those Flacco-led teams.
Yeah, 100%.
The Bears beat the Panthers. I was concerned after the first drive, the Chuba Hubbard had a 38-yard touchdown run, and the Panthers went up 7-0, but then that was basically it from there on out. DJ Moore just went off against his former team. I should have seen that coming. Something to prove. And DeAndre Swift had 100 total yards in the first half alone. The Panthers have issues on defense. I was happy to see J.C. Horn out there, but they lost their best defensive player for the season earlier in Derek Brown, and they lost their 2 starting linebackers, Shaq Thompson and Jewell, and that's why DeAndre Swift was able to run all over them. And so Caleb Williams was able to get Kmet involved, Gerald Everett, a little bit of that as well. 2 touchdowns, as I mentioned, for DJ Moore. 400 offensive yards, 36 points for Chicago. Caleb Williams was phenomenal against the blitz, and then PFF has this over the past 2 weeks. Against the blitz, Williams has been 17 for 19, 200 passing yards, and 2 touchdowns. So that's the thing is like usually you see those numbers for veteran quarterbacks against the blitz where they're not freaked out by that extra rusher. Williams already sees the field really well. The offense is the issue with Shane Waldron, but hopefully they fire Waldron after this year so they don't double down on this strategy because he's coming into his own despite not a lot of help in terms of scheme.
And the thing is, I'm sure some people would qualify that obviously this Panthers defense is really bad. So like, but at the same time, I still think regardless, you play who's in front of you, and I think for a guy like Caleb Williams to kind of ace this test against a much more, a low-level NFL defense is kind of what hopefully will help pay dividends for Williams to have a bit of a confidence boost.
Yeah.
And to also kind of lay as a baseline that although obviously it's against a weaker defense, this stuff is available to him. Because some rookies in this situation, even against poor defenses, can't get this stuff going.
Right.
Like so can't activate that. And I honestly think this was sort of a maximizing of some of the real high points of the last few games that he's had, where obviously just things were not. He wasn't seeing the field as well, and B, I just don't think, as we've been saying, not many aspects of this offense have been doing him a whole lot of favors.
Totally. Yeah. So I'm hoping for more creativity in his future. The game that I was least interested in the 1 o'clock window was Dolphins-Patriots. So hard to pay attention, but
that was a tough one.
Love you, Odell Beckham Jr. Always and forever. Happy to see him at least out there on the field, although he picked wrong with this team given how the trajectory of the situation. But the Dolphins beat the Patriots.
I think the vibes are souring in New England, though. At this point. There's just with this group of players on offense, there's just a very limited there's limited area to navigate.
I know. I feel for Jacoby Brissett because he's always thrown into the worst situations, and he's not a bad player. He's tough as hell, and he takes hits, and he's an old school. Like he'd thrive in 1975 as a quarterback, just like stand in the pocket, be a big boy, take a hit, have a big arm. He's not an athlete though, and he can't escape.
Exactly.
That's the issue. In terms of silver linings for the Pats, Christian Gonzalez had an interception, so I was happy to see him back out there after having an injury-plagued rookie year.
He's a great player. He's a stud.
He is a stud, and they have stuff to build on, and we'll see how Drake May looks because he'll probably get out there eventually, although I still worry for him with this supporting cast. Ramondre Stevenson is the best player they have out there on the field on offense. But it's hard to do when you can't do anything else in the receiving game.
I even think if they want just to still kind of shepherd May along a little bit, I don't even think there's a real risk in putting out Joe Milton just to see what they have. He's got a big arm. He doesn't know very much how to direct it. But I just think honestly, if there's any clamoring for just to see a change at quarterback, I honestly still think it's worth letting Drake continue to understand the rhythms of playing in the NFL and seeing people do it, so he can kind of continue to learn and not get thrust into a situation where there's a real potential. Quarterbacks can lose their young QBs can lose their confidence really quickly, and that really it's intangible, but it really does affect how they play. I saw it. I think we discussed this with Zach Wilson and the Jets. Like, not even necessarily saying his career would have been radically different, but I'm saying when you're thrust in a very, very
Sam Darnold.
And Darnold is a perfect example of also seeing both ends of it, being in a bad situation and seeing him in a really ideal situation, how successful he's being.
There's no sport in which context is more necessary to see someone's. There's none. I mean, in basketball, you can still put up numbers if you're on
even
a
bad team, right?
Hockey, same thing. I mean, you can hit like crazy if you're on a bad team, but you have no run support in terms of baseball. Like it's unfortunate, but quarterbacks can get swallowed up and all of their talent can go to waste if they're not in the right situation. The Dolphins, as I mentioned, Odell showed up. Tyreek finally got involved a little bit, and Jonnu Smith is having a good year quietly for the Dolphins at tight end when they haven't really had a good tight end for a while.
Yeah, they mostly been like relying on like Mike Gesicki or a few guys like that.
And Gesicki is kind of a one-trick pony.
Yep.
He's a pass catcher and he can't block.
Totally.
Jonnu can do both. And that was against his former team, by the way. Okay, so I guess let me just run through the rest of these afternoon games. And until I get to the Giants, where I have more to say. The Broncos beat the Raiders, and this resulted. Again, this is the Broncos are 3-2. The Broncos are on a 3-game win streak.
I was so surprised watching the video of Bo Nix and Sean Payton screaming at each other, and I was like, oh, they won this game.
No, they're father-son.
Yeah, I was like, why are they getting so upset they're winning?
Sean Payton described him in the press conference as saying he had a little bit of Ferris Bueller in him.
That is so funny to me.
It's so funny. They're father-son. I actually like their dynamic.
Because Sean Payton also, I love it. That's like as irritating as Sean Payton can be sometimes. What I love about that is like he's actually being honest.
Yeah,
he's literally being like
he's too honest. Remember what he said about Nathaniel Hackett?
Yeah, right. It's like he's not being like no. In the heat of the moment, things can get a little hairy, but then obviously we come back together afterwards. No, he literally is like, this guy's dumb as shit sometimes, and I have to yell at him sometimes.
Yeah, no, look, I mean, I'm a Sean Payton apologizer. Maybe it has to do with the fact that he's a former like New York Giants OC, and I like that he comes from the Parcells school, so there's something about him that I enjoy. But I feel like I could be, if I were an NFL head coach, I'd be like Sean Payton, like accidentally saying everything I think off the top of my head to the press. So I'm a fan of his. But
credit to them too. They I think even with
Vance Joseph.
That's what I'm saying is I think even I do genuinely think there has been some sort of culture shift, and there has been a little bit of an identity change where it was mentioned on the broadcast too, I think last night before the Steelers-Cowboys game started. But right, we'll recall, I mean, this team just last year gave up 70 points to the Dolphins.
Yes.
And now looking at this team with Vance Joseph at the helm of the defense, they're one of the better fronts in the league. Patrick Surtain is arguably the best cornerback in the entire NFL.
I think for sure.
He just had an electrifying 100-yard pick six return where he almost looks like he has the build of like Calvin Johnson as a cornerback.
Well, I was thinking about it watching the Jets game because Sauce Gardner is in that conversation too. But you see that he wasn't on Justin Jefferson the whole time. Like, they pass off in zone so much.
Yep.
And the difference is that the Broncos asked Surtain, you're on an island.
Exactly. You're just go and figure it out.
So I think he's the best corner in the NFL. And I think to your point about the pass rush being better than expected, it's a lot of simulated stuff. Like
totally,
the strength of the team is the secondary, and then they run through, and then they surprise you with different pass rush looks. But like they picked off Surtain picked off Minshew in the end zone. He got picked off a second time, and then Aiden O'Connell came in.
And when you can trust those guys in the secondary, it makes it so that the pass rush is a little bit, or the pass rush is more effective just because they have more time to work.
Yeah.
And you're seeing it pay dividends for guys like Zach Allen, who was honestly always a good player in Arizona, but I feel like he's taken another step.
Yes.
So it's been cool to see. It's been nice to see. The Broncos defense honestly has been a very surprising and like cool success story, because I was not anticipating them to be like a top 5, top 7 unit, and they really are so far.
Absolutely. The other two games in the afternoon before I get to my Giants, the Cardinals beat the 49ers. Kyler actually ran the ball this game. Finally, he didn't last game, and I thought that was an odd choice. That's why he lost.
Awesome runs.
I mean, he had a 50-yard run to the house. Baby Yoda out there churning along.
He just absolutely runs like a little baby.
He is.
I love it.
He's a great player. He's such a fun player to watch.
It's literally like barefoot baby on kitchen tile floor.
Yeah.
Just fucking pumping.
He looks like the most athletic toddler that you see in a flag football practice happening around the road. Whoa, that kid's got a future.
That kid can fly.
Maybe he can go play for college at some point, but that's what he looks like out there. Arizona scored 14 unanswered, and then they ended up winning. The Niners are now 0-2 in the NFC West,
Yeah,
having
that's
lost
crazy.
to the Rams and the Cardinals, and they play on a short week Thursday Night Football against the Seahawks, also coming off a loss. The Niners, they're extremely talented, but they're getting older, and this is what we have to like what we expected. How can you not feel a little bit of a hangover after the way that they've lost both Super Bowls to Mahomes? It's like, what can we do? We've gone there twice. And then the year before, they were almost there, but they had a horrific injury to Brock Purdy in Philadelphia. It's just like, damn, is this demoralizing at a certain point? And then Jake Moody got injured, and that was kind of all she wrote for them. They weren't able to keep up, and they lost the game. The second time that they've lost at the end of the game to a division rival, and that's the kind of stuff I look out for.
And there were a few frustrating things, obviously, for them because, Brandon Ayuk had probably his best game, but he couldn't reach the end zone. He was kind of all over the.
Same with Jordan Mason, he couldn't get in the end zone.
They were all over the field. They were kind of getting chunks of yardage, getting into position, moving the ball efficiently. But it's frustrating when you move the ball efficiently but can't convert in the red zone. And did Mason fumble the ball at one point? Am I remembering correctly?
Yes.
And so also the idea, and then a team like the Niners who. It's rare, I think, when they really. I think it happens every now and again when some sloppiness shows up, but for a pretty disciplined team, in my view, having a ball security problem there with Mason fumbling it, and then the last play to Kaiser White, where White picked the ball off from Purdy, made it so that they didn't actually have the chance to come back and potentially win the game. I think right now, given the composition of the roster. And where some of the limitations are, not to say Jordan Mason has had a great year He's another really great success story, but he of course does not have the ceiling that Christian McCaffrey has. And as I was saying before the season started, if some Brock Purdy throws that he has been, really successful at both, it's both skill and luck at the same time to avoid some some really compromising interceptions. If those go the other way. In key moments like this one against the Cardinals, the margin for error is quite small.
Quite small. And then the Packers beat the Rams. This is what we expected. Jordan Love still is throwing stupid ass interceptions, so maybe he's got more Brett Favre in him than we realized.
I can't believe he threw the ball when he was falling into the end zone. I was like, dude, come on. What are you doing?
Stop doing a Will Levis.
That was a Levisian play.
Totally. I can't say I paid too much attention to this game, but it just felt like, because I was running around at this point, but this is what we expected. We both picked this. We both picked the Packers -3, and they covered.
And the biggest thing for me is just like credit to the Rams. The Rams fight every game.
They do.
They are
Stafford in particular.
They are so beat up at so many positions. There is so much attrition on this roster that has basically happened, since week one, that they have just lost guys dropping like flies. And Stafford just goes out there and does this. He tries like hell to win these games, even though the odds are really stacked against him.
Yeah. And then the Cowboys beat the Steelers on Sunday Night Football in a game that was really delayed. I stayed up way too late to watch some of this, so I'm like kind of drowsy by this point. But this is not a game the Steelers should have lost, given the takeaways that they were able to get from Dak Prescott. I don't think that they should move off of Justin Fields by any means, but I do think some of the issues that we were seeing or thought about with their receiving core are showing up now. George Pickens, I don't know if he has the mental toughness to be a number one receiver. He's so annoying out there. Like, what does he ever? Always effing open was written on his eye black. It's like, okay, dude, just prove it first. I mean, you're not Justin Jefferson or Jamar Chase or, prime Randy Moss or Odell Beckham Jr. or whatever. Like, don't say you're always effing open, because you're not as robust in terms of your skill set as a receiver as you think you are. He's not as fast as those guys. He's strong, but let's not pretend he's, he's a mid-tier number one receiver, if not low-tier number one receiver, if I were to go through the NFL right now. So
it's frustrating because there's a number of things with Pickens where it's like by his his measurables, his play style, there are elements where I'm like, this can be a number one guy, but I think this was even an issue, or at least something discussed in college. He just like is a bit of a head case, and it kind of has always been a bit of a head case. And I think he can kind of get to a point where like if things aren't going his way, I mean literally and figuratively, like if he is not the engine of the offense and things are there in gaining yards, getting passes, catching passes is a little bit of a struggle. He not only I think can get frustrated, he also just sort of checks out. Like he kind of just like is like, all right, whatever.
He's a talented player.
I'm done with this. Like,
but he's more of a 1A to me than he is a number one. Like there are 8 guys or something like that who are number ones, and I wonder if we could just. We don't have a ton of time, but I want for fun, just go through this mental exercise. Proven number ones. Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson, Tyreek Hill, AJ Brown. I think even though he plays more of a 1A role. You wouldn't even put him up there.
No, I'm thinking of, would we put Devontae Adams up there still?
Not this year.
No, but I guess maybe right. Not this exact. But yes.
But that kind of guy, Malik Neighbors is a number one receiver.
But I think the way
I don't know. My point is just like,
but
he's
the way
not
you exhibit,
top 10.
But I think the way you exhibit it too is sort of like a high volume, pretty consistent output as well, and in pivotal moments, rising to the occasion. And in this pivotal moment, he's pulling Jordan Lewis down by his face mask and walking off the field dejectedly.
Right.
Like it's just
CeeDee Lamb on the other side is a number one receiver.
It's just and it's just sort of like, I think there's a bit of an attitude problem, but also these things always come out ultimately into the same tributary for me, which is this. It doesn't really matter if you're winning and succeeding, if you're difficult.
Yep.
But when you're not, it's annoying.
Right.
And it becomes a problem.
Mike Evans is another one. Garrett Wilson, I think, is a number one receiver.
Mike Evans for sure. Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Totally.
So it's just I would all these guys are ahead of
and even when CD was, I guess, expressing some frustration with Dak on the sideline, like that's different because honestly CD's proven himself. Like CD was arguably a first team all-pro wide receiver last year. He got a big extension. Him and Dak are sort of on like a more even playing field than like Pickens being like, oh, so annoying. It's like there hasn't been enough, I think, to really give Pickens the runway to sort of express like, I'm the reason we're winning and other people are the reason we're losing. I don't think that's definitive enough yet.
Exactly. Okay, now we have fun. The New York Giants.
Oh, I can't. Yes, baby, let's go.
I was happy. So I wrote them off all week. Like usually I'm listening to Giants podcast. Shout out to my guys at Big Blue Banter. I'm reading the beat reporter stuff. I'm getting ready for the game. I just was so dejected going into this weekend, and last week we had so much work. We had the VP debate and I was sick, and I just was like, I can't emotionally invest in the Giants right now. I should have, because wow, did they come out and they played well. And Daniel Jones has not turned the ball over in a few weeks. He actually was able to throw it deep, which was shocking because it seems like he's been struggling with that given the number of neck injuries that he's experienced. The fact that he's coming off the ACL. He just never also has been that much of a power thrower. His mechanics are perfect. I mean, he worked with David Cutcliffe. That was a big reason why the Giants drafted him, who had worked with the Mannings previously. So his mechanics are amazing, but he's not the most talented in terms of throwing the ball downfield or from different arm angles. He just doesn't have that skill set. So I don't know, man. Look, I had the Giants finishing ahead of the Cowboys. The Cowboys could have lost that game last night against the Pittsburgh Steelers. And this Seahawks defense is no joke. I know they have injuries, and this is why Tyrone Tracy, their rookie, who is he's only played running back for 2 years at this point, less than. He was a wide receiver that was converted. And he is still learning the intricacies of the position. He looked awesome.
I was quite impressed. I was like, whoa. Like I actually thought, I feel like, because I almost feel like I had some sort of exposure to him because of watching the preseason Hard Knocks.
Yep.
But even was watching, I feel like some of the highlights that they had in the episodes, I was like, oh, like I didn't really know too much about this guy at all, and I feel like he really does have some pop, and he showed that he was pretty. He not only seemed to have some pop, but he also was like, oh, like he's actually also just like kind of reliable, can get 3 to 5 yards a clip
Yes.
pretty capably, and just in showing that consistency, I think was very important.
Well,
too.
look, like the Giants hung or they pushed with our line, but for most lines they covered with the Cowboys. They hung right in there, and they should have won that game if they decided to go for it on fourth down instead of being so conservative when they were 3 yards away from the goal line. But that's the thing, is just like Jones is getting a little bit back more in a rhythm. He's not the franchise guy, but he's so coachable, always trying to do the right thing, and he can deliver the football. And they used his legs for the first time in a while with the absence of Singletary. And of course, the elephant in the room, Malik Neighbors not being there. How could the Giants recover from that? They moved the ball up and down at will. The only reason that the Seahawks had an early lead is because Eric Gray on fourth down, 4th and inches, got into the end zone. He fumbled the football. It looked like that you could have made a case that he got in, but that there wasn't enough to overturn it. And so a Seahawk ran it up and ran down the field for an 102-yard defensive touchdown on 4th down. And I was like, oh my effing God. Because last year, I went to Giants Seahawks, which was week 3 or week 4.
I remember this game, yeah.
Monday Night Football, and Daniel Jones threw a pick 6 at the 1-yard line. I'm on one end zone. It's the opposite end zone. He throws a pick 6, and the defender runs right in front of my fiance.
Oh, it was right toward you.
Run towards me.
It's like, oh God.
Hey, yeah, I see you. Like we're straining to look on the other side of the field. Like, how's that pass? Oh, the defender's running right towards us. So it was just like that, and they're down, but then they drive back down. They tie it up. They keep driving. It's 10-10 at the end of the half, and then the Giants get the ball to start the half. They score. And Wan'Dale Robinson is this like safety blanket for Daniel Jones. They clearly have this trust. They're shockingly like just different in physical stature, with Daniel Jones being this big, like nearly 6'6", just big dude. And Wan'Dale is 5'8" on a good day. I mean, he has a running back's body, but he plays wide receiver, and he's really tough when you can get him into space. So on offense, that was great. And then just got to say, like, the Giants lead the league in sacks right now. Part of that's because Deshaun Watson, they played 1 week, and he gives up the most sacks, as we just established. But this defensive line is looking good. And Tay Banks, he did not have a good week against CeeDee Lamb on Thursday Night Football last week. He redeemed himself, and he had a really, really good game. I have a stat right there. I'll find it in a sec. But what are your thoughts?
He was great against DK Metcalf, which was always a tough assignment, just given how physical and how imposing Metcalf is. But I definitely wanted to give. Yeah, I was definitely impressed because knowing that Daniel Jones was going into this game without kind of his safety blanket receiver and Neighbors for the last few weeks.
Yeah,
I was even more impressed. I was even more impressed with some of the throws that he was able to make, and also was willing to make. I mean,
shout out to Darius Slayton.
That Slayton touchdown
always steps up.
That Slayton touchdown in the left side of the end zone was a really beautiful ball, and which also exhibited a few things to me where I was like, he had time, the line held up.
The line's been good.
Slayton runs a good route, and all DJ has to do is progress through his reads and fire it in there, and he's capable of doing that. It's just more a matter of the infrastructure around him also succeeding, and I think it was a good sign that they should take solace in the fact that they were able to win this game against a Seahawks team that was undefeated at some point. They're obviously missing starters on defense, but they both sides of the ball were playing well to win this game, and without your star player, without Neighbors.
Yeah.
And then to also top it off with a hilarious and incredibly fun to watch blocked field goal.
Oh, yes. Isaiah Simmons,
Yes, Isaiah Simmons to come in and have that play.
Giants fans were like, wanted him to, I forget which year he was, but maybe it was Andrew Thomas's year. That would have been a disaster. He was like such a highly touted linebacker prospect because he is such an athletic freak. He struggled to make it in the NFL because he's too lanky, and
he kind of fell into like the position.
He's too big to be a corner or safety, but he's too small to be a linebacker. So they have been using him in this jack of all trades thing. And now on special teams, you showed his. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm playing with the mic. On special teams, he shows his athleticism because you can't get. I was listening to the rule book.
I was curious about this too. I wasn't sure if that was a.
You can't get a running start, so you have to like jump over the line in no, that's how athletic he is, to be able to catapult over the lineman without getting any head start.
He didn't run.
Was legal.
I see.
So he was able to block the field goal attempt, and it was just like a great way to end the game. I was very happy to see that. So Deonte Banks had 6 tackles on the team, an 89.9 overall PFF grade. Again, I don't trust PFF that much, but the eye test matched as well. He surrendered only 2 receptions on 5 targets for 17 yards. So he's had an up and down career so far, but he's also been put in like an impossible situation as cornerback 1 basically since he got drafted out of Maryland. And the game that people always pointed to at that time was he locked down Marvin Harrison when Maryland played Ohio State. So if he can continue to keep that up, then the Giants have stuff to build on here. And as I've been saying, they're a more mediocre team than they are one of the worst teams in the NFL.
But he has what I like too, Banks, which is he has the measurables, and he also has the right attitude of like, I am a number 1 corner. I will play like that, and I am always focused on being a disruptor, making my mark no matter who I'm playing against. So I think he has. I already think it both tangible and intangible. He has it. I think once he puts it all together, he's going to be a really good player because he's also still very young.
Super young. The team is really young, and I'll say this: Joe Shane. First of all, no matter what happens, I really hope they don't move off Dable. I love Dable. It's been a hard time for him. He knows how to manage the game,
and I think he's crucial to wins like this. Like I think they win games like this not in spite of Brian Dable, but because of him.
Absolutely, he's friendly with the players. We don't have time to play it, but there's a really funny moment where I think it was Wandale live streaming. All right, let's just play it really quickly. This is so good. So Wandale Robinson. Again, just indulge my Giants fandom here, folks. Wandale Robinson was live streaming on Instagram Live after the game, and you can hear Dable in the background telling him to shut off the live stream. But it's clearly all in good fun.
Oh, no, sir.
Hey, stop posting that shit. Hey. You see it from the Hard Knocks.
Oh, no, sir.
He just has a way with players. He really does. And like they all love Dable. He scored really high in the NFLPA players assessment of their head coach. I just see, I was watching Sunday Night Football last night. You see Mike Zimmer on the sideline, and you're like, oh God. Like that era of coach. I mean, unfortunately for Belichick, it's part of what did him in too. It's over. You've got to be able to be a smart mind, but also relate to the players.
And I think Dable also, the interesting thing too that I think he does relate on as well is that it's different because I think he has a little bit less of the other way of emotionality than Dan Campbell does, because Dan Campbell's very passionate. Like his passion leads to him like crying, whereas Dable's passion leads to him like screaming and throwing his headset and stuff.
Dable cries a lot, but it's usually
it's like anger tears almost.
Well, he's like super emotional. It's a long story. I'm way too indie about this, but he was raised by his grandparents, and he often talks about his grandparents and his significance, and he'll cry like pretty easily about that. But yes, in terms of the passion for the team, not necessarily. Last thing on this, because I got to run, but Joe Shane had a phenomenal draft this year. Malik Neighbors, starter, obviously, hit on that. Tyler Nubin has started at safety for them the entire year and has played well. Drew Phillips has started at nickel corner the whole year and has played well. Tyrone Tracy is a rookie in the 5th round who's starting and playing really well. Theo Johnson was catching passes, a rookie out of Penn State that they took a flyer on, also starting. The Giants have 5 starters out of 1 draft, and they're all rookies. Got to give credit to Joe Shane on that front. All right, guys. With that, that's the end of our NFL recap. I'm going to read some IMs and get out of here. Writing in Biden's, that's funny, says, I'm curious what the process is to consume all the NFL games in 1 week. Do you watch NFL Red Zone? Do you watch one game at a time and then nail the highlights for other games afterwards? Watch commentary afterwards? I'm not ashamed to admit, I am a little ashamed, have Red Zone on the TV, and then I have 2 games that I toggle between on 2 laptops. My fiance's laptop, he's a part of this. He's an enabler, okay? I don't know. We have similar interests, which is part of why we love each other. But yes, so his laptop and then my laptop, and we'll we use Sunday tickets, so we'll have the games we're most invested in. So I have 3 screens in front of me usually on NFL Sunday, and then later on I'll usually go check back and read some statistics. But for the most part, when you have Red Zone on, especially in the 4 o'clock window, you're watching most of the games because there's so many commercial breaks. Brandon from Kentucky, Joe Milton has the biggest arm since Jamarcus Russell. Speaking as a UT fan, he does have a big arm. Not sure what that's in reference to.
Well, because I was just saying maybe we should start
Joe Milton. Oh, yes.
Yes. The Patriots, yeah.
Tater Tot. Caleb is thriving against the blitz, making checks at the line and manipulating defenses with his eyes. It's his 5th game. Someone talk me down. I'm getting irrationally hopeful. I'm not talking you down. I think that the only thing holding him back is the offensive line and the play calling.
No, truly. I literally think it, especially the last 2 games prior to this one, you were seeing something where it's like, oh, like, he is the light at the end of the tunnel. He's like what you see kind of peeking out through the clouds. It's like it's not a Caleb problem, in my opinion.
Exactly. Haitian Fogua. I'm finally catching your show live. Big fan. The Vikings are using the pass really well, but the run game isn't the best. Good, not the best. I think their kicker won the game against the Jets. There's a lot of very good, but do you see the run as a problem? They have been struggling a little with the run. They had it in that game after Aaron Jones went out.
That's my thing. Is I think it would be we'll have to see if Aaron Jones is what the prognosis is. I thought it was looking good with Aaron Jones though. I don't
think Ty Chandler's that I think he's much more of a passing option. He's not as good between the tackles. And Aaron Jones they're on bye next week. 2 weeks to rest up from a groin injury that they say is not that serious.
It's a different story if they have to change Chandler's role from like a supplementary one to a primary one. But as you said, if Jones can get right, I think it's totally fine.
Yeah. Blind anti-imperialism. Are you guys talking about Bama's loss on Saturday? No, but Vanderbilt. Wow,
that's crazy.
Holy moly!
They literally marching the field goal post into the streets of Nashville. It's just insane.
I mean, good for them. They deserve that victory lap.
It was a wild week of college football too. Like 4 or 5 teams in the top 11 all went down to unranked opponents.
We got a new number 1, the Texas Longhorns.
Yeah,
hook 'em, baby. I'm kind of I'm a bandwagon Longhorn fan now these days. Because I'm also just invested in the Arch Manning story.
Oh yeah, agreed.
J-Man J's, hey guys, hockey starting tomorrow. Wish I wasn't going through a horrific toothache and chest inflammation, but hockey season should help my mood anyway. Left is best. Oh, thank you, J-Man J's. Yes, just didn't have the time today to go through it, especially because it's just such a long regular season. But we will catch up with hockey for sure at some point. All right, guys, gotta run. All right, one more. Dable's Just Foreman beard. Not enough for love from my cameos on the field. Sad face. Yes.
He's looking great.
Beard's back, looking trim, healthy. Brian Dable. Brian Dable for president. All right. Appreciate it. I'm going too far. They're 2 and 3. All right.
That's fine. I'm with it.
All right. We will see you on Thursday for our locks. Bradley had a good weekend. Remains to be seen for me. Go Saints. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.